Okay, Felix. So I haven't mentioned your father yet. I'm assuming that most people would probably know, but your father was the legendary Dick Francis, famous jockey before coming a even more, well, arguably even more famous author. Um, Growing up, did you think of him as a jockey or an author?
I thought of him just as my dad, actually, but he was he'd been champion jockey the year I was born, so he was a name in racing all my life. I suppose it's the defining moment in his life, both as a jockey and as an author, was the collapse of Devon Lock in the 1956 Grand National. It thrust the name Dick Francis from the back pages to the front pages of the newspapers, and certainly, all my life I was the son of the man who rode Devon Lock, who didn't win the Grand National. Um, but it made life interesting, shall we say, at home. I don't really remember my father as a jockey at all. I mean, he retired from race riding when I was just turning 4 years old, so I don't remember him as a jockey. Um, in fact, the only film I have of him riding in a race is that ill-fated Grand National when he on Devon Lock. But I remember him riding a lot when I was a child. He used to go and ride out for the local trainer. He did a lot of judging at horse shows. I watched him ride a lot, but not race riding. And But the books made life interesting. I mean, my brother and I always knew when to be quiet in the house because Dad was working, and my mother too, because my mother and father worked on the books together, and we would be riding ponies out in the field at the back of the house, and we knew when things were going well because the windows would be shut and he would be in his office working, and if things weren't going terribly well with the book, he'd lean out the window and shout at us, sit up straight, boy, you know, uh, put your heels down, tuck your elbows in. He, of course, wanted us to be horsemen when we wanted to be Lester Piggott. So there was always a conflict there. But it was an exciting time. I say, and I've said before, that I think I grew up in the greatest fiction factory of the 20th century. I mean, discussion over the breakfast table wouldn't be, who was taking the children to school. It would be whether Sid Halley could survive the night with a 38 slug in his guts, with his blood dripping through a crack in the linoleum floor. Or how much explosive does it take to blow up an aeroplane? I mean, all those sort of questions. And the house was always full of interesting people, not only other authors, but my mother was very interested in the theatre. She'd been in repertory theatre in Hereford after the end of the Second World War and had made lifelong friends there, including people like Arthur Lowe, who would turn up for lunch on a Sunday. And I could never understand why he wasn't wearing his uniform, and other great. I mean, the place was full of interesting people. It was never strange to come home and find someone you'd seen only on the television sitting on the sofa chatting away to my parents. So it was fun, and it was the family business. I mean, the first thing the first bit of a Dick Francis book I helped with was I designed the remote control bomb that blew up an aeroplane in Rat Race. Shouldn't say blowing up aeroplanes, but it was. Nowadays, everyone has remote controls. You control the television, you control the garage doors, your cars open and close by remote control. But back in 1970, remote controls didn't exist, and I had to manufacture one out of solenoids and magnets and things so that you could remotely blow up an airplane. So I got involved and I was a 17-year-old physics student at school. So I got involved in the Dick Francis books quite early, and later on I was a schoolmaster, and a schoolmaster appeared in Twice Shy. It was all the family business. All the members of the family had their expertise drawn on for for stories, and it was a lot of fun. My childhood was full of happy memories. I haven't got any skeletons in the cupboard there.
I'm trying to do my mental arithmetic. Were you already a pilot when your dad wrote Rat Race, or were you inspired to become one after?
The book was published in 1970, and I learnt to fly in 1970. The truth was that I wasn't a pilot when it was written, but I was by the time it was published. But my mother was a pilot too. She learnt to fly for Flying Finish, which was an earlier book. And my father had been a wartime pilot before he was a jockey. He'd flown first Spitfires and then Wellingtons and Lancaster bombers. You know, when people said to him, "Isn't it dangerous riding horses over Aintree fences at 30 miles an hour?" his answer was always, "Well, at least no one's shooting at you." So flying was in the family, and my son is now a pilot. He's an Army Air Corps pilot. So, you know, flying has gone on through the generations.
Now, how old I mean, first of all, did you used to read the books for your own pleasure, or did you, in the course of helping out, did you read them? How old were you when you started to read them?
Well, the first book, Dead Cert, was published when I was just coming up to 9 years old. And I didn't read that then. But I caught up when I was about 12 or 13. And thereafter I would read the book when it was finished. And then years later, when I was helping with the books, I would read them as they went along. It's very frustrating, you say to your father, "Come on, where's the next chapter?" Because you get to the end of a chapter and there wouldn't be another chapter. And so that was fairly frustrating, but it was also exciting and fun. I mean, I did a lot of helping with the one which had a teacher in, and I used to do the scientific bits. As a physicist, I would help with the science. But it was I caught up fairly quickly, and thereafter, I consumed them with a passion. Like everyone else did.
In a world where even then quite a lot of books were quite sort of graphic, do you think that's probably why there wasn't that much sort of sex and stuff in them, because he knew you were going to read it?
I think it wasn't so much for what his sons thought, but every year he would deliver one to the Queen Mother. When Devonlock collapsed, which was owned, of course, by the Queen Mother, and he was sitting in the changing room afterwards, very morose, and Peter Caslett, the trainer, said, "Well, we better go and see the royal party." And Dad thought he was going to get sent to the Tower, but actually, and he was also worried that it would destroy the Queen Mother's passion for racing, steeplechasing in particular. But it didn't, and they became lifelong friends, and he used to deliver a book to her every year just before publication. And I think that I remember him saying once that she had said to him that she thought he was getting a little bloodthirsty. So I think he would tone it down for that, more than for his children reading them, yes, I'm sure.
In recent years, people have been able to sort of bid for the honour of being immortalised in one of your books. How many real people unwittingly made it into Dick Francis or your books over the years?
Couldn't answer that question. All sorts of people. All sorts of people have been put in unwittingly. You normally make some changes so they don't recognise themselves. At least they all think they don't recognise. I mean, one or two people have said, "That was me, wasn't it?" And I'd say, "No, of course it wasn't." Well, it probably was. That's a fun thing to do. I mean, I love writing books. I actually particularly like writing the books when I've finished it. But I do like writing books. If I didn't, I wouldn't carry on. I mean, I know that people, people like reading them, and that's great and everything. But if I didn't enjoy the process of creating them, I mean, I'm 71 years old now. If I'd still been a schoolmaster, I'd have had my feet up for 10 years. And it is hard work. I mean, it is a job of work. It doesn't just happen. The members of the family just seem to say, I can't come to to your book launch party this year. I'll come next year. And I'm thinking, but I'd have to write another book for that. Everyone thinks it just happens, but it is. I have to be very disciplined, and it is very much a job of work. I mean, it's every day, all day, every day. You're thinking about it, and you've got to write between 90 and 100,000 words. I mean, anyone can write 1,000 words a day, but if you write 1,000 words today, and you've got to write 1,000 words tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and they've all got to join up, that's when it becomes hard work. And it is hard work. But I love it when it's done. And I suppose I enjoy it when I'm doing it. I always go into deep depression around Christmas time thinking, am I ever going to get this book finished? And it does, it is stressful. But I've done it 18 times. Let's hope I can do it next year again.
And one of the characteristics of your books and your dad's books before were they're quite fast paced. They're what people definitely would describe as page turners. So I'm assuming that when you sit down to write, you get in the zone and you're as excited as the reader is when you're suddenly getting into that. That's it. That's the feeling that it gives.
Yes, it does. It also, when you read a book much more quickly than you write one. I mean, I only type with 2 fingers. I mean, I never learned to touch type properly. And someone says, well, why don't you learn now? And I say, well, it's, old dog, new tricks problem. But more so, I can't think faster than I can type with those with my just 2 fingers. So it moderates the speed, and so it's quite good. But I get into trouble with my wife for saying this, but there is something about when you're writing the denouement, the exciting end. I don't know how raunchy I can be on this program.
As raunchy as you like.
But I've said in the past that it's a bit like having sex. The excitement is building and building and building and building, but you're still trying to not quite get there because you know that if you wait and wait and wait, getting there will be even more exciting. So it's a bit like that. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but I know it's true. So you could, when you're writing it, you want to stretch all that excitement out for as long as possible before the climax at the end.
No, I was going to. Now you've said that, I was going to ask if anybody's actually seen themselves in the book that wasn't in it. But it seems a bit of an anticlimax question now after that.
Oh yes, lots of people think they're in the book, and that was me, wasn't it? It was me, wasn't it? And I'm thinking, no, it wasn't. But now you mention it, perhaps it could have been. But it's I took over the Dick Francis canon of work, where no doubt we'll talk about that in our next segment. But I took over the canon of work, and it's the greatest joy for me to be able to continue what my father did before, and I hope that people are as happy with my work as they were with his.